Hello and welcome back to On the Workbench. Today we're taking a look at just how many cuts can we get out of this Kobalt 24 volt brushless cordless tile saw. A very unique tool with a very unique proposition, but let's see how it performs. I've got a variety of materials here lined up here that you can see. I've got everything from brick to porcelain to ceramic to glass tile here, and we'll see how it goes. We got some different dimensions, odd dimension materials. We're gonna kick this off and see how it goes. So what we're going to be testing here today, I've got the battery that came with it. This is now fully charged at 4 bars. I did a complete discharge on this on another tool, the heat gun, and then fully recharged it to 4 bars. So this is the first time it's really being put to the test. So this should be, in all possibilities, the maximum that we're going to get out of it. Although the fade on these lithium-ion batteries is very minimal, but we're going to give it the best case scenario that we can get today. All right, so now to get started on setting up the saw, we're going to go ahead and remove the fence. If that's the locked position, we're going to move that to the unlocked position. Lift that off, we'll need that. So we can slide our table forward. We're going to check the tightness of our blade with our wrenches. And we will remove the gauge that's stored in there because we will be testing with that later. Pull the pin down, lock it out of the way. Now if we go to the rear of the saw, I've got my rear splash guard. Go ahead and set that on right there. And then we got a drain plug right there that we want to have set. And now we're going to use our wrenches. We're going to put the hex one on first. We may have to raise up our blade guard. We'll put our hex wrench on first. And then we'll put our keyway slot wrench on second. Like that. We're good. We'll set the wrenches aside. And back here, we will pull out the bevel gauge. We'll test that again in a little bit. Lift up, fold our splash guard off and around. Turn the saw around. You can see I've got the setup with plastic. And the other important thing I've got is a pair of safety glasses on to protect my eyeballs. I only get one pair of these in life, so might as well protect them. And now with that drain plug in there, let me see if I can move the camera over. I've got a pitcher of water. I'm gonna go ahead and pour that in the slot here. I'll be right back with more water. And now with more water, we will stop it there. So it's just shy of 5 quarts. Maybe we call that 4 quarts, 4¼ quarts of water, all the way filled up. And I'm also going to check that my table can slide freely. There is that stop right here. We got to watch out for our cutting. We're going to make sure that this can slide freely. I'm going to go ahead and reattach the fence here to the rear of the saw, like that. Make sure I lock it down. Now I'm going to realign the saw and realign the camera. Now we're going to take our fully charged 4 amp hour battery, slide it on the side, just like that. Make sure that the yellow key is in so we can turn it on. There we go. Did you see that? There's a really nifty blade break on this saw. And now let's get to cutting here and we'll see how the saw performs. Our first test is going to be this piece of tile. You see it's got this nice decorative pattern. We're going to cut this down. I'm going to set this on the fence like this. And we're going to make our first cut. nice clean cut. I cut that with the surface up here just to see how that would set up here. And so works rather nice. So that's one cut right there. We have our off cut. And so the first thing here that comes to mind is that if I had to make a bunch of these cuts here, I would want to be able to set a stop block. So I can use this angle guide, set it to 0, put this down on my fence, lift it up to wherever I need to go, and now I've got a stop block so I could repeat that cut onto additional tile, or I will set my tile up like that. Let me move the camera up here a little bit. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. So now I've got this angle miter gauge here, tighten it down, set here where I can score up my tile to my fence here, and I can be able to make repeated cuts here, make another cut here. And I want to drop the height of my blade guard down to keep that splash in the table. Just like that. 2. Now let's up it. Here we've got some basic concrete. All right, so we're at 23 cuts so far. Now let's move the fence. All right, we are now set at 45. Remember, this does not actually lock down at 45. So we will try cutting this with a 45-degree angle on it. Make sure that you've got any slop and debris off the table so your tile sits flush. Do another hex tile, and this time we will change this to the 22.5-degree setting. Have to find our open ports. All right, so now we've got this glazed stone mosaic. We'll go ahead and open this up. Think about if you were setting up a backsplash, this is one of the things you might buy, or a decorative piece for a shower or something else. We'll go ahead and cut a square edge into this for one of our runs. Obviously, when cutting this, you need to make the first step is making sure you get a good one. Sometimes you'll get cracks in one of the edges from just chipping transport and handling, pretty common. And so you may have to strategize for which piece you go with. There you go, that's squared off there. I used a scrap tile to help hold this down so the tiles aren't lifting up as I go. There's a variety of tricks for how to be able to accomplish that. Just be careful you don't damage the face of your tile. Any imperfections you can take out usually with the grout. All right, that's about 29 cuts. Now let's go for some brick. This is a thin brick paver. We'll go ahead and try cutting that. I can tell there is some debris building up on the table. No problem. So we're over 30 cuts now, and now I've got this 24-inch long tile, but I'm gonna need to rip it down, so I'm gonna go ahead and take off this fence. Now I know some people are gonna say there's maybe other ways to do this. Perhaps you would use a handheld saw or something else to be able to rip it or cut it, but let's try this with the saw, but we're gonna have to get creative. All right, so maybe you saw what I did there, where I set up a fence here, squared it up with a combination square, and then I locked the tabletop down in place so it won't move. I've got a wooden fence here. I'm going to use that to be able to rip an edge of this 24-inch long tile off. There we go, there's our ripped piece. So it does work. Let's check out the combination square to see how consistent that stayed. Little counting for the kerf of the blade. We're actually pretty consistent all the way across. So that does work with a 1x4 and a couple of basic clamps. You can make a fence to go cut this. I did feel the saw pushing away from me as I went. This is not secured down, so that's a problem that's easily overcome. And you could rip this half-inch thick tile. This is a 24-inch long stuff. That's pretty common these days. I guess that's stylish. I'm clearly not the arbiter of good style. That is clearly, if you ask my wife, that is somebody else's game and not mine. We'll go ahead and take off this fence now that we've proved the concept. And now we will put the ordinary fence back on. Now after, I think it's about 34 or 35 cuts, give or take. Let's check the battery. We are now down to 1 bar of charge. Let's do this again. And we will see if we can run this saw out of battery. Oh, there you go. You saw the saw cut off mid-cut. Let's start that again and see if this is a dead battery or it just got jammed. I think the battery must clearly be getting weak. Now it won't come back on, so I believe that's about 39.5 cuts that I got out of the saw with the 4 amp hour battery that comes with it. So that works out to be probably about 35 linear feet of tile cut with the saw on a 4 amp hour battery. You do the math for how many batteries you need to keep going with your job. Maybe that works. If you've got 2 batteries and you can cycle them back and forth, then you're going to be in really good shape. Obviously, some of these cuts were a little more strenuous than others were. Whether it was the 1/2-inch thick tile took a heavier toll than the little thin subway tile did. So there's going to be a little bit of subjectivity based on the thickness of the tile that you're cutting and what kind of material it is. Now let's take a look at that waste tank. Hopefully you can see the solution there. I'm going to pull out the 4 amp hour battery that we just proved, because there was one thing left I did not do, and that was to test the bevel gauge or bevel guide. So I'm going to go ahead and set this up here for you. Like that. Let me turn this around. So there's the bevel gauge set up. I've got a 2 amp hour battery I'm going to put in for this test here. This does have full bars of charge. I'm not sure how old this is. I'm going to go ahead and put this in just to demonstrate a quick cut with this in place if you need to score the edge of a tile. All right, so I've got this piece of tile I cut earlier, make another cut on it. I'm going to set this right into the groove of the table, rest it up against the little bevel sled here. This is at 45 degrees. I'll turn the saw on. And so there is the bevel cut. You've got to make sure it's not sliding down there at the end. A little bit of a little hiccup there. Make sure you've got firm pressure to keep that uniform going across. You might use this if you've got an inside corner. Obviously, you've got a little margin of error because you can put a grout line there to help to hide any miscuts like that on the saw. Go ahead and take that off. Now we will go and drain the saw. So now I've got a hardware store bucket here. I'm going to go ahead and set that on the ground, lift up on the saw. Pull the battery out, set that aside, unlock the table, slide the table back, and then now we're going to make sure that our 5-gallon bucket is right underneath our drain valve. Then I will simply pull that up out of the way and let that drain out. Obviously, there's going to be other slop and mess on the tabletop here that will need to get rinsed down and taken care of. Maybe a little bit of extra tilting and turning, and we will get the saw lined up the way that we want it. Have to let that dry out. All right, so now that you've seen this cut, to make just about 40 cuts or maybe 36, 38 linear feet of tile of various degrees of thickness with the included 4-amp-hour battery. You have to be the judge if you need a second battery or a third battery. I always think it's a good idea to have an extra battery and charger regardless of what you're doing in your back pocket, so you can always cycle and keep going with the project that you're working on. The last thing you want with any cordless tool is to be waiting on a battery to charge. And with this Kobalt system, you can pick up an extra battery and charger for really next to nothing. And to be honest with you, making 40 cuts, give or take, will probably get you a decent amount of work done. So since generally you're making cuts at the edges of your tile project, because in your field area, you're leaving your tile uncut. Obviously, if you've got, say, a toilet flange or something else, or a post or a pillar, you've got to go around, you're making a few more cuts. But 40 cuts, give or take, I think that's a fair estimate for what this can put out on a single 4-amp-hour battery. If you have an 8-amp-hour battery or the ultimate output battery, you will get a little more runtime out of this. So as I'm cleaning this up here, I think overall the saw did a pretty good job of containing the water on the tabletop, letting it drain back down. It's not perfect. Any tile saw is, of course, going to have some splash out. That's to be expected. The debris did get kind of clunked up here in some of the channels, but again, you kind of have to expect that, and periodically you're going to need to stop to clean it out. And so if you do have to do a battery change, probably not a bad time to get a shop towel out and wipe down your tabletop to get some of that debris out so your tile lays flat on the surface. Another little hiccup you might have seen is it would be nice if there was a better stop on the edge here. It makes me a little uncomfortable having the guide have somewhat, if I'm using basically a table saw sled with a miter gauge attached to it, makes me a little uneven, or a fence block attached to it. I'd like to have a little smaller block on the side or something that can help hold the tile down so that I get everything square to the table. But overall, this is a pretty good value, and I love the fact that it's cordless. I can think of plenty of situations where access to power may not be quite as easy to come by, or to be fair, power that you would want to use reliably for a saw. So if you've got a project, say out back in a shed, in an unfinished basement, someplace else you don't want to run an extension cord, you could easily set this up and take this out to it. So all things considered, I've got to say I'm pretty impressed with the saw. I cut through everything I threw at it today and more. Would I love to have gotten more cuts out of it? Sure, but I could always upgrade to either the 4 amp hour ultimate output or the 8 amp hour ultimate output battery to get more out of the saw, or buy another battery and just go back and forth while one charges. I use it and then flip-flop them, have lunch or whatever, and be good to go. So all things considered, yeah, I gotta say this is a really impressive saw. That there's a lot to like about it. The nitpicks about not having a rip fence or cutting longer tile can be dealt with, as you saw with my ad hoc solution there. It's not perfect. I know there's other ways to do it. That's really its biggest shortcoming. But all things considered, this is quite the deal and is a serious contender in the tile saw space, at least in my opinion. And so if you get any thoughts about this, go ahead and put it down in the comments below. We'd love to hear about it. If you haven't already done so, please give this video a thumbs up. Click the subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Thanks to the folks behind the scenes at Kobalt for making today's video possible. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a great day. Bye.